The banging started just as the sun went down. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was a series of 3 violent thuds against the wooden door of my cottage, the kind that don't ask for permission. I pulled the door open. A hard rain was falling. For a moment, my mind couldn't process it. They were like ghosts from another life. My father, Arthur, stood at the front, his shoes dripping onto my welcome mat. My mother, Eleanor, was clutching a pair of cardboard boxes against her chest as if they were precious. And lurking behind them, using them as a shield from the storm, was my brother, Nathan. He had a smug look on his face. My father's eyes scanned past me into the warmth of my living room. He skipped the hello. "You're all alone out here, Clara," he stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. "No husband, no children. This is far too much house for one person. We're moving in." These were the very same people who had slammed their own door in my face 5 years earlier, leaving me without a job and lost in a storm of my own. Now here they were, standing on my porch, poised to seize the only thing I had managed to build from the wreckage. I didn't yell. I didn't break down. I just met their cold stares. And then I reached for my phone. Before we get into what happened next, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It means the world to me. Growing up, I didn't live in a home. I lived in a photograph. We had a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet Indiana suburb, complete with a manicured lawn and a pristine white fence. To anyone driving by, we were the definition of a perfect family. But inside those walls, it was a cold, sterile environment. The image was all that ever mattered. My mother, Eleanor, was the curator of this perfect image. She was far more concerned with appearances than with feelings. The cream-colored carpet had to be immaculate. The furniture was stiff and formal, a living room set that no one was ever allowed to actually live in. "We have to keep it pristine for guests," she'd say. The thing is, we never had any guests. We weren't a family unit. We were just subjects in a portrait she was desperately trying to prevent from fading. My father, Arthur, was the one who constructed the frame for this picture. He was a senior accountant who lived and breathed by a code of rigid rules. There was a regulation for everything. Dinner was served at 6:30 p.m. sharp. The evening news came on at 7, and no one was permitted to speak while it was on. His home office was his sanctuary, the command center from which he governed his tiny world. He never raised his voice, he simply corrected. He'd look over my school reports. "Clara, a 93 in English is good, but your brother Nathan got a 95. You need to focus more." And then there was Nathan. My older brother was the centerpiece of the family photograph. He was the golden child, oozing with a superficial charm. He knew exactly how to flash a smile to get what he wanted. But beneath it, he was deeply arrogant and self-absorbed. In his eyes, and our parents', he could do no wrong. The household rules were simply different for Nathan. Nathan was boisterous. I was told to be quiet. Nathan was a slob. I was expected to be neat. Nathan was given the world. I'll never forget one evening when I was about 11. Nathan was tossing a baseball around inside the house. My mother told him to cut it out. He just chuckled and threw it again. This time it struck her favorite porcelain lamp. It shattered on the floor. My mother came running at the sound of the crash. She saw the glittering fragments of porcelain on the carpet. Her eyes went to Nathan. Then they shot to me. I was just sitting quietly in an armchair reading a book. "Clara," she hissed, "what have you done?" "I didn't do it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Nathan did. I saw him." "Do not lie, Clara," she snapped, her tone sharp as glass. "It's a very ugly habit. I looked over at Nathan. He was smiling. That little smirk. He knew. He always knew he'd get away with it. I was sent to my room without dinner. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened. I heard my father get home. I heard my mother's low voice. Clara broke the antique lamp. I heard my father let out a long, heavy sigh, a sound of disappointment that was clearly intended for me to hear. A moment later, I heard Nathan ask what was for dinner. I was the flaw in their perfect picture. I just didn't belong. I was drawn to art, to design, to creativity. I doodled on everything, my notebooks, my sneakers. I perceived the world in a vibrant palette of colors and shapes, while they only saw it in spreadsheets and bottom lines. Your hobby, as my father condescendingly called it, was a source of constant friction. "Stop wasting your time with those silly drawings," he'd say. "You should be studying, like your brother." The irony was, Nathan barely studied. He skated by with mediocre grades, but my parents framed it as him developing his social skills. I consistently earned straight A's, but they were the wrong kind of A's. An A in art class doesn't count as an A in a real subject, my father once explained to me, as if it were a universal truth. The absolute worst night happened when I was 17, deep in the process of applying to colleges. We were all at the dinner table in that stiff museum-like dining room. "I need to declare my major," I said, my voice feeling small in the silent room. "Business," my father said instantly, not even looking up from his steak. "It's a solid, stable career. Or perhaps finance," my mother chimed in. "Like your father. It's respectable." I took a deep breath. "I want to major in graphic design." A heavy silence fell over the table. My father slowly placed his fork down. My mother's face tightened, the same expression she wore when I once accidentally tracked dirt onto her precious carpet. My father finally looked at me, his eyes icy. "Graphic design," he repeated, saying the words as if they tasted like poison. "That's not a real career, Clara. It's a hobby. It's like your little doodles." "Mrs. Henderson's son is going into pre-med," my mother said, rearranging the peas on her plate. "Imagine how proud they must be." "Graphic design?" Nathan snorted, breaking into a loud laugh. "So what? You're going to make logos for fun?" "It's a real profession, Dad," I pleaded. "People build entire careers on it." "You'll look into business," my father said again. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, or finance, something practical. And then they all laughed. My father's lips curled into a thin, cruel smile. My mother let out a short, tight giggle. And Nathan laughed loudly, openly, right in my face. They weren't just laughing at the idea. They were laughing at me. It felt like a tiny, sharp blade had been pushed into my chest. It didn't draw blood, but it carved a deep, permanent line inside of me, separating me from them forever. I didn't cry. I just looked down at my plate, my appetite gone. "I will prove you wrong," I thought. The thought wasn't shouted. It wasn't born of rage. It was a cold, hard stone settling in the pit of my stomach. "I will get out of here, and I will prove every single one of you wrong." Proving them wrong required getting away, and getting away required college. My parents had been putting money aside for Nathan's education since he was born. It was a foregone conclusion. A top-tier business school, my father would announce. Maybe even an Ivy League. Nathan didn't have the grades for it, but that was just a minor detail. They would pull strings, pay for tutors, find a way. For me, however, there was no college fund. "If you're so insistent on this art school fantasy," my father declared, "then you can figure out how to pay for it yourself. Consider it your first lesson in the real world." The real world arrived quickly. The summer Nathan turned 18, A brand new blue sports car appeared in the driveway, adorned with a massive red bow. "Happy birthday, Nathan," my father boomed, dangling the keys. My mother snapped a dozen photos for the family album. I turned 18 3 months later. There was no party, no car. My father just handed me a birthday card across the dinner table. Tucked inside was a single $100 bill. "Don't spend it all in one place," he said with a smirk, thinking he was hilarious. I took the bill. I didn't say thank you. The next day, I walked to a used bookstore near the community college I had enrolled in. I found a heavy, outdated textbook on graphic design principles and software. It cost me $85. It was the best investment I ever made. My life quickly dissolved into a grueling routine. My parents insisted I pay them rent to continue living in my own childhood bedroom. So, I got 2 jobs. My days became a frantic map of exhaustion. I had classes from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. At 1:30, my shift at a local cafe began. I wore a stained brown apron and perpetually smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I'd force a smile and say, "Have a wonderful day." To customers who were often rude and demanding, that shift ended at 6 p.m. From there, I'd race to the campus library, where I worked the circulation desk until it closed at 11 p.m. It was quiet there and lonely. I'd do my homework under the faint glow of the desk lamp, my dinner usually consisting of a granola bar from a nearby vending machine. I'd drive home in my beat-up 10-year-old sedan, a car I had purchased myself after saving for 3 grueling months. The house was always dark and silent. My parents would be asleep. I'd take a quick, quiet shower and collapse into bed, only to wake up at 6 a.m. to do it all over again. I was 19 years old, and I felt like I was 60. I would occasionally see kids I knew from high school. I saw them in their new cars, heading to parties, sometimes laughing with Nathan in his blue convertible. I was never invited. I was just the girl who was always working, the girl who always looked exhausted. My mother would call me sometimes, usually right in the middle of my library shift. "Clara, dear?" "Hi, Mom. I'm at work." "Oh. Well, are you eating enough? You looked so thin last Sunday. Your brother just accepted a summer internship at your father's firm. We're just so proud of him." The calls never failed to leave me feeling hollow. They weren't checking on me. They were just delivering a progress report on Nathan. The only glimmer of light in those years was my grandmother, Rosemary. Rosemary was my mother's mother, but the two were like night and day. My mother existed in a sterile, grayscale world. My grandmother lived in brilliant technicolor. She lived about an hour away, in a small, charming cottage she and her late husband had built together decades ago. Her home smelled of freshly turned earth, baking bread, and old paperbacks. It never smelled of bleach and unspoken expectations. I would drive out to see her on Sunday mornings, my one day off. I'd be so bone-tired I could barely keep my eyes open. She would always have a bowl of hot soup waiting for me. She never inquired about my grades or my jobs. She would just look at me, her eyes full of a warmth I saw nowhere else. "How is your soul, sweetheart?" she'd ask, and I would finally let myself fall apart. I told her how tired I was, how lonely I felt. I told her that my parents just didn't understand me. She would take my hand, her skin as thin as parchment, but her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't you ever let them make you small, Clara," she told me once as we sat on her porch, watching hummingbirds dart around her wild, overgrown garden. "Your parents, they live in a tidy little box. They're afraid of anything they can't control. But you, my dear, you are full of color." I confessed that I felt so lonely all the time. She just shook her head. "No, sweetheart, that feeling isn't loneliness. It's independence. It's the sound of your own wings growing. It's difficult, I know, but it is all yours. Her words became my guiding star. Her little cottage, her garden, her unconditional warmth, that was my true home. When I was scrubbing burnt coffee pots at midnight, I would repeat her words to myself. This is independence. It took me 4 long years, 4 years of double shifts, sleepless nights, and constant pressure. But I did it. I graduated with my degree in graphic design with high honors. I was 22 years old. I was the first person in my family to ever graduate with any kind of honors. I was so proud. I bought a small stack of formal invitations. I drove to my parents' house and placed one in their mailbox myself. I even followed up with a call. The ceremony is this Saturday at 10 a.m. I told my mother. I get to walk across the stage and everything. There was a long pause on the other end. "Oh, Clara," she said, her voice tight. "Saturday? Are you positive?" "Yes." "Oh dear, that's the same day as Nathan's big fraternity golf championship. It's the finals. We promised we'd be there to support him. You understand, don't you?" I said nothing. "Well," she said, rushing to fill the silence, "it's just a community college, isn't it? It's not like a real graduation, not like Nathan's will be from business school. We can take you out for a celebratory dinner next week." They never did. I went to my graduation ceremony alone. I stood there in my black cap and gown on a sweltering summer day. I looked out at the sea of faces in the crowd. I saw parents holding bouquets of flowers. I saw proud fathers aiming video cameras. I saw mothers wiping away tears. I scanned the rows, looking for them. I don't know why I bothered. A part of me thought maybe, just maybe, they would surprise me. They didn't. I walked across the stage. I shook the dean's hand as he handed me my diploma. The announcer called out my name, Clara Montgomery, summa cum laude. I walked back to my empty chair in my empty row. That night, I went back to my tiny apartment, which I had moved into a year prior. I ate a bowl of instant ramen for dinner. I sat and stared at my diploma. I landed my first job at a small design firm the following week. I didn't tell my parents. They never asked. 5 years went by. I was 27. I was no longer just scraping by. I was actually doing okay. I had clawed my way up from a junior designer to a lead designer. I was finally an associate art director at a small but well-regarded agency in Indianapolis. I wasn't wealthy, certainly not finance wealthy, but I was self-sufficient. I had my own apartment in a decent neighborhood. It was small, but it was all mine. I paid my own bills on time. I had a modest savings account. I had meticulously built a life for myself, one hard-earned brick at a time. I thought I was finally secure. I thought the worst was behind me. The ground fell out from under me on a Tuesday. I walked up to my office building, coffee in hand, but the glass doors were locked. A heavy chain was wrapped around the handles. A single white sheet of paper was taped to the glass. It read, "Filed for Chapter 7, bankruptcy. All assets seized." We all just stood there on the sidewalk, my colleagues and I staring in disbelief. Then the collective panic set in. There had been no warning, no final paycheck, no severance package, no health insurance. Everything was gone, effective immediately. Our 401ks, frozen. The security I had so carefully constructed, it had vanished into a pile of dust in a single morning. The first week was pure panic. I spent every waking hour updating my portfolio, sending out resumes, 50, then 100, then more. The second week was despair. The rejection emails started trickling in, or worse, nothing came at all. "We've decided to move forward with another candidate. You're overqualified for this position. You're underqualified." My savings account, the one I had been so proud of, began to evaporate. First the car payment went out, then insurance, then my rent check bounced, then the red-stamped envelope started arriving, late notice, final notice. My world shrank until it was just the four walls of my apartment. My friends from work were all in the same sinking boat. They couldn't help. I stopped answering my phone. I just sat in my silent apartment after the power was shut off. The silence was deafening. I was down to my last $20. My rent was 2 weeks overdue. The official, terrifying eviction notice was now taped to my front door. I had 72 hours to vacate. I was sitting in my car in the apartment complex parking lot. It was the only place I had left with electricity, so I could charge my phone. I had one final, desperate option, the one I had sworn to myself I would never, ever take. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my contacts. Dad. I pressed the call button. He answered on the second ring. Clara, why are you calling at this hour? Shouldn't you be at work? My voice cracked. Dad, I lost my job. There was a long silence on the line filled with static. Then, I see. The company. It went under, I whispered. It went bankrupt. Dad, I'm in serious trouble. I'm about to be evicted. I just need a small loan. Just enough to cover my rent until I can find something new. I'll pay you back, I swear. Every single penny. I was begging, and it felt utterly humiliating. Actions have consequences, Clara. His voice was ice cold. Not angry, not sad, just cold. We warned you that your little design world was unstable. We told you it was a hobby. You made your bed. Dad, please, I cried. This wasn't my choice. I'm going to be out on the street. You should have listened to us, he said flatly. You should have gotten a real degree. In business. I heard a soft click on the line. My mother had picked up the extension. Clara, dear, she said, her voice tight with annoyance. We simply can't help you. You can't expect us to. Why not? I sobbed. Please, Mom. We are paying for Nathan's MBA, she said, as if that was the only explanation necessary. He's at a very prestigious business school. It is incredibly expensive. We are draining our savings for his future. An MBA? I stammered. He's 30 years old. He is investing in his future, she snapped. Unlike some people, you need to learn to be responsible for your own choices, Clara. We can't always be there to bail you out. Bail me out? I thought. When have you ever bailed me out? Please, I whispered one last time. I have nowhere else to go. I'm sure you'll figure something out, my father said. It's a valuable life lesson. And then he hung up. I sat in my car, completely numb. I don't know why I did what I did next. I guess a tiny, foolish part of me thought that if they saw my face, if they saw how desperate I was, they would change their minds. I drove to their house, the perfect house with the manicured lawn. I stood on their front porch. It had started to rain, a cold, hard Indiana rain that felt like the sky itself was spitting on me. I knocked. My father opened the door. He was wearing his bathrobe. He just stared at me. I was soaking wet, shivering uncontrollably, my hair matted to my face. Please, I whispered, I have nowhere to go. Just for a couple of nights? Please, Dad. He looked at me for a long, silent moment, his face a hard, unreadable mask. He glanced past me at the pouring rain. Go home, Clara, he said. I don't have a home, I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. That is not my problem, he said, and he closed the door. I heard the distinct final sound, the click of the deadbolt sliding into place. It was louder than the thunder. I stumbled back to my old, beat-up car, the only thing I had left in the world. I drove away with no destination in mind. My apartment was no longer mine. I drove and drove until I ran out of tears and gas. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour supermarket, parking in the far back corner where the delivery trucks idled. I killed the engine. The rain hammered against my windshield. I leaned my forehead against the cold steering wheel, and the sobs I had been holding back finally broke free. Not small, quiet tears, but huge, ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that stole my breath. I was 27 years old. I had a degree with honors. I had 5 years of professional experience. And I was homeless. My own family, my own mother and father, had shut their door and left me in the storm. The next few days were a miserable blur. My mind has mercifully blocked out most of the details. I slept in my car, learning to recline the driver's seat just so, to avoid a crippling neck cramp in the morning. I learned which gas stations had the cleanest public restrooms. I'd go in at 5 a.m., buy a $1 coffee I couldn't really afford, and wash my face in the sink. I'd use the rearview mirror to brush my hair. I spent my days at the public library or a cheap coffee shop, anywhere that offered warmth and free Wi-Fi. I applied for jobs on my dying laptop, any job. Barista, cashier, stalker. I was desperate. I looked like a ghost, and I felt like one. I hadn't had a proper meal in days, surviving on cheap coffee and the last of my granola bars. I was in a small cafe called the Daily Grind. It was inexpensive, and the Wi-Fi was reliable. I was huddled in a corner, just trying to feel warm, staring into space. I know I was pale and shaking slightly from lack of sleep and food. Clara? Clara Montgomery? I looked up. The voice was vaguely familiar. It was Sophie Diaz. We hadn't been close friends, but we had a few design classes together in college. She was always so cheerful, so kind. She was one of those people who just radiated light. She was standing there holding a latte, and she was looking at me. I mean, she was really looking at me. She didn't just see a person in a coffee shop. She saw me. She saw the dirty clothes I'd been wearing for 3 days. She saw the dark, hollowed-out circles under my eyes. She saw the slight tremor in my hands. She didn't ask, "How have you been?" She didn't say, "Long time no see." She just quietly pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, her face filled with genuine concern. "Clara," she said, her voice so gentle, "what's wrong? What happened?" And just like that, I broke. All the walls I had built, all the times I had told myself, I'm fine, it all came crashing down. I told her everything. The job loss, the bankruptcy, the eviction, my parents, the phone call, living in my car. I cried right there in the middle of the daily grind. Big, ugly, uncontrollable tears. I couldn't stop them. Sophie didn't say, "Oh, that's awful." She didn't awkwardly pat my hand and look away. She just listened patiently until I had cried myself out. Then she stood up. "Come on," she said. "What?" I sniffled. "You're coming home with me." "Sophie, I can't." "You are not sleeping in your car for one more night, Clara. Let's go." She drove me to her apartment. It was small but bright, filled with thriving plants. She ran a hot bath for me, gave me clean clothes, a soft t-shirt and sweatpants, and made me a sandwich, a real sandwich, with turkey and cheese. I devoured it in about 3 bites. I realized I had been starving. "You can have the couch," she said, "for as long as you need. No strings attached." I stayed on her couch for 3 days, and I mostly just slept. I think I slept for nearly 24 hours straight that first day. I'd wake up, eat whatever Sophie put in front of me, and then fall asleep again. She just let me be. She just helped. On the 3rd day, I was sitting at her small kitchen table. I was clean, I was fed, and I was starting to feel human again. "Okay," Sophie said, sitting down with 2 mugs of coffee. My boyfriend, Leo, he runs a small marketing agency. It's not huge, it's not your old firm, but it's a solid business, and he needs help. Sophie, I can't interview, I said, looking down at myself. You look like a talented designer, she said firmly. I already sent him the link to your old online portfolio, the one you made back in college. He wants to meet you. Today. Leo's office was the polar opposite of my old one. It was a cozy, bright space located above a taqueria. The whole place smelled faintly of grilled onions and cilantro. Leo himself was the opposite of my old boss. He had a warm smile, a beard, and was wearing a comfortable flannel shirt. He had my old student portfolio open on his computer. This, he said, pointing to a logo I had designed for a purely fictional company back in school. This is really good. Clean, smart. What was your thought process for choosing this font? We talked for an hour. We didn't talk about my resume or my last job. We talked about design. Finally, he closed the laptop and looked at me. Sophie told me you're in a bit of a tight spot, he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a statement of fact. I am, I said, my voice small but steady. He nodded. Look, I can't pay you what your old firm did. Not even close. But I need someone with a good eye. I need someone who actually cares about the work. And frankly, I needed them to start yesterday. He smiled. Start on Monday, 9 a.m. We'll sort out the rest as we go. I walked out of his office and stood on the sidewalk. The sun was warm on my face. I could smell the tacos from downstairs. I took a deep breath, a real breath, the kind that fills your entire chest. It was the first time in weeks I had breathed without a knot of fear in my stomach. I wasn't fixed. My life wasn't magically perfect. But I wasn't falling anymore. Someone had reached out and caught me. I had been working for Leo for 2 weeks. It was hard work, but it was good, honest work. I had just received my first paycheck. It was small, but it was mine. I was starting to look for a room to rent. My phone rang. It was an unknown number from the same area code as my grandmother's town. My heart seized in my chest. Is this Clara Montgomery? A woman's serious professional voice asked. Yes? This is Nurse Thompson from St. Jude's Hospital. I'm calling about your grandmother, Rosemary Vance. My stomach plummeted. I hadn't seen her in months. I had been too ashamed of my situation, too embarrassed for her to see me like that. What's wrong? I asked, my voice trembling. She had a major stroke, honey, the nurse's voice softened. She's here in the hospital. The doctors, well, she's been asking for you. She keeps asking for you. I borrowed Leo's car. I don't remember the drive, I just drove. I ran through the hospital doors and into the ICU. And then I saw her. She looked so tiny and frail in that large, sterile hospital bed, surrounded by wires and beeping machines. I walked to her bedside. Her eyes were closed. Grandma? I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered open just a crack. She saw me. She tried to speak, but only a faint whisper of air escaped her lips. I'm here, Grandma, I said, the tears starting to fall again. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I took her hand, the same hand that had held mine so firmly on her porch. It was cold now. She managed a smile. It was the faintest, tiniest smile, but it was for me. She squeezed my hand, one last time. A small, weak pressure, and then she was gone. The line on the monitor went flat. The nurses rushed in, but I just stood there, holding her hand. I had been too late to say goodbye properly, but I was just in time to hold her hand as she left. The funeral was a blur of gray. It was a cold, overcast day, matching my mood perfectly. My grandmother's simple wooden casket sat at the front of a small chapel. There were flowers from her gardening club and a few of her old friends, women with kind, wrinkled faces. And then there was my family. My mother, Eleanor, dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue, seemingly more concerned about her expensive black dress than her own deceased mother. My father, Arthur, stood stiffly, as if he were attending a business luncheon, even checking his watch twice during the service. Nathan sat in the back row scrolling on his phone. They were not grieving. They were waiting for it to be over. After the service, my mother cornered me. She placed a cold, manicured hand on my arm. "Clara, dear," she said in a low whisper, "I'm sure Mother left a few things behind. We'll need to go over to her house this afternoon to sort through it all and see what's valuable." "She's not even in the ground yet, Mom," I said, disgusted. "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, her mask of sorrow slipping. "It's just a practical matter." I turned and walked away from her. I couldn't breathe the same air as them. The reading of the will took place the following week at a small lawyer's office in my grandmother's town. I drove there in my rusty sedan, having taken the day off from Leo's agency. When I entered, my parents and Nathan were already seated in plush, comfortable chairs. I took a hard-backed chair near the door. They looked at me as if I were a stranger who had wandered in off the street. The lawyer, Mr. Davison, was a kind-faced man who had known my grandmother for 50 years. "Thank you all for coming," he said, opening a large manila envelope. He read through some preliminary legal jargon. My grandmother's modest bank account was to be split evenly between my mother and me. Her personal effects were to be donated, with the exception of her jewelry, which went to my mother, and her book collection, which she left to me. My father was already shifting impatiently in his seat. "And now, Mr. Davison said, putting on a different pair of reading glasses, "we come to the primary asset of the estate, the cottage and the land it occupies, located at 15 Oakwood Lane." My mother sat up straighter. My father leaned forward. "Rosemary was very specific in her final wishes," the lawyer continued, his eyes meeting mine directly. "She wrote, 'I leave my home, my garden, and all the love contained within it at 15 Oakwood Lane to my granddaughter Clara Montgomery. It is to be hers and hers alone. She was the only one who ever saw it as a home, not just a piece of property. May she find her peace there.'" The room was utterly silent. I couldn't seem to draw a breath. I just stared at the lawyer, the words echoing in my head. Then my father spoke. "That is unacceptable." His voice wasn't loud, but it was cold and deadly. "Arthur," my mother whispered, placing a hand on his arm. "No, Eleanor, this is some kind of joke." He glared at the lawyer. "An old woman's sentimental fantasy. The house should have gone to Susan. It should be ours. Clara is not in a position to manage a property. She's irresponsible. She's practically unemployed," Nathan chimed in, finally looking up from his phone. "She'll probably just sell it and blow the money." The lawyer simply looked at them, unfazed. "The will is ironclad. Rosemary had it signed and witnessed just 6 months ago. It is final." "This is an insult," my father said, standing up so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "We are her family." "Clara is her family too," Mr. Davison stated calmly. My father turned to me, his face turning a blotchy red. I had never seen him lose his composure like this before. "You will not keep this house, Clara," he hissed. "You don't deserve it. You manipulated that senile old woman." I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice, when it came out, was steady. I looked at my father, the man who had left me to fend for myself in a storm. I looked at my mother, the woman who had prioritized Nathan's golf game over my college graduation. I looked at my brother, the one who had always laughed at my expense. "Grandma seems to have thought differently," I said. Then I walked over to the lawyer. He was holding a small, weathered envelope. He handed it to me. I opened it. Inside was a single old-fashioned brass key, the key to the cottage. I slipped it into my pocket. My parents stormed out of the office without another word. Nathan trailed behind them like a loyal puppy. That evening, I drove to the cottage. It was dark and cold. I hadn't been inside in almost a year. I put the key in the lock. It was stiff, and I had to put my shoulder into it. The door creaked open. The air inside was stale and musty. I fumbled for a light switch. A single bare bulb flickered on, casting long shadows. The place was a wreck. Paint was peeling from the walls in long strips. A dark, damp stain marred the ceiling. When I tried the faucet in the kitchen, a stream of rusty brown water sputtered out, followed by the sound of a steady drip, drip, drip from the pipe beneath the sink. It was old. It was broken. It was falling apart. I sat down on the dusty floor in the middle of the empty living room. I was all alone. My grandmother was gone. I was deep in debt. I had a job that barely covered my living expenses. And now I had a broken-down house that my family was actively trying to steal from me. I should have been terrified. I should have been sobbing, but I wasn't. I just sat there listening to the sounds of the house, the drip of the pipe, the whisper of the wind outside, the groan of the old wood settling. It was a quiet sound. It wasn't the lonely, hollow silence of my empty apartment. It wasn't the cold, judgmental silence of my parents' house. This silence felt different. It felt sacred. I placed my hand flat on the old wooden floorboards. They were solid. They were real. "Okay, Grandma," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm home. I'll fix it." The first few months were the hardest of my life. I moved in with almost nothing: a sleeping bag, a duffel bag of clothes Sophie had given me, and the key. I slept on the living room floor. The cottage was freezing. The heating was broken. The water still ran rusty. I took cold showers at a truck stop down the highway. I lived on canned soup, warmed up on a small hot plate I found at a thrift store. But I had a strategy. I was still working remotely for Leo from the floor of the cottage, using my phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot. I'd sit for 10 hours a day, wrapped in a thick blanket, designing logos and websites for his clients. Every paycheck was immediately split in two, half for food and utilities, the other half for the house. My very first purchase wasn't paint or furniture. It was a wrench. I spent my nights on the internet watching DIY videos. How to fix a leaking P-trap, how to patch a hole in drywall, how to replace a kitchen faucet. My hands were constantly filthy. I broke every single nail. My knuckles were covered in cuts and scrapes. I spent an entire weekend covered head to toe in grime, wrestling with the ancient water heater. When it finally rumbled to life and hot, clear water poured from the shower head, I just sat on the cold bathroom floor and cried tears of pure joy. I painted the living room a warm, buttery yellow, the color of morning sunlight. I found my grandmother's old gardening tools in the shed. They were coated in rust, but I cleaned and sharpened them. I started with the weeds, which had choked out her beautiful old rose bushes. I pulled them out one by one, my back screaming in protest. But with every weed I yanked from the earth, I felt like I was pulling out a piece of the ugliness from my old life. I was alone, but for the first time, I wasn't lonely. My work for Leo was steady. He was a good man who paid on time and trusted my judgment. But I knew it wasn't my long-term future. It was a lifeline. One of Leo's clients was a small local bakery. They were thrilled with the menu I designed. The owner, a woman named Maria, recommended me to her friend who owned a small inn and needed a website. He called me directly. "Leo says you're the one I should talk to," he said. I'm not sure. I hesitated. "I work for Leo. He said you do freelance work on the side," the man replied. I looked around my half-painted living room. I was on my own now. I could make my own rules. "Yes," I said, my voice suddenly firm. "I do." He became my first official client. I built his website from scratch. He paid me directly, the first check that was just for me. I used the money to buy a real bed. I had started a business without even realizing it. I just kept working. The inn owner told a bookstore owner. The bookstore owner told a restaurant owner. My grandmother's town was small, and word of mouth traveled fast. I realized I needed a business name. One evening, I was sitting on the porch I had repaired myself, watching the sunset and drinking tea from one of my grandmother's old mugs. I remembered what she had told me years ago on this very porch when I was crying. "Keep your eyes on the horizon, Clara," she had said, "not on the storm at your feet." I went inside and filed the paperwork online. I named my company Beacon Design. My life settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't the frantic, desperate pace of my old life. It was a quiet, steady beat. I'd wake up early, make coffee, and work in my small home office, which had once been my grandmother's sewing room. I'd take breaks to work in the garden, planting tomatoes and lavender. I fixed the leak in the roof. I was 30 years old. My business was growing. My life was stable. My peace had put down roots. And then Daniel Price walked into my life. He was the bookstore owner, my third client. He needed a new logo and an e-commerce website. He came to the cottage for our initial meeting. I remember I was covered in dirt from planting the tomatoes. "Clara Montgomery?" he asked, looking a bit confused. "I'm so sorry," I said, wiping my dirt-stained hands on my jeans. I lost track of time. "Please, come in." He was quiet and calm, with kind, thoughtful eyes. He didn't seem to notice or care about the dirt. We sat at my kitchen table, one I had found at a flea market and repainted myself. We talked about his bookstore, about our favorite authors, about design. He wasn't like my father, who saw the world in dollar signs. He wasn't like Nathan, who only ever saw his own reflection. He saw the work. He cared about the stories. I built his website. It was a huge success. He asked me to send him my invoice. An hour after I sent it, he emailed back. "Thank you, this is perfect. Also, I seem to have made way too much lasagna. Would you be interested in taking some off my hands?" He brought the lasagna over that evening in a heavy glass dish. He ended up staying for dinner. We ate at my little kitchen table. It was easy and comfortable. He left the lasagna dish behind. "I'll need that back," he said with a small smile from the porch. He came back the next week to retrieve his dish. I had filled it with homemade cookies. He came back the week after that, just to come back. Work slowly turned into friendship. Friendship blossomed into love. Daniel was like my cottage, quiet, strong, and steady. He wasn't trying to fix me. He didn't see me as broken. He just loved me for who I was. He loved my quiet nature, my independence. He even loved my messy garden. By the time I turned 32, my life was completely unrecognizable. Beacon Design was thriving. I had clients from all over the state. I even had to hire a part-time assistant to keep up. The cottage was no longer broken. The paint was fresh, the pipes were silent, and the garden was overflowing with roses, tomatoes, and lavender. It was a true home. Daniel and I lived there together. We worked, we read books on the porch, we cooked dinners. We had found a quiet, simple joy. I was safe. I was happy. I had proven them all wrong, and I had done it all without them. I hadn't seen or spoken to my family in almost 5 years. I thought that chapter of my story was closed for good. I thought I was finally free. The past returned on a Tuesday. It arrived as a text message. My phone buzzed on the kitchen table while I was making coffee. Daniel was in the living room reading. It was a perfect, ordinary morning. I glanced at the phone. It was an unknown number, but the name attached made my stomach clench. Nathan. Hey, Clara. Long time. Heard you're doing really well. Your business looks impressive. Mom, Dad, and I were thinking we'd like to come visit you this weekend. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. My hands started to shake. The coffee mug suddenly felt heavy. 5 years of absolute silence. Not a single call, not a text, not an "I'm sorry," not a congratulations on not being homeless anymore. 5 years. And now this. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked from the other room. He could read my mood from my silence alone. "It's my brother," I said, my voice a strained whisper. "They want to visit. This weekend." Daniel put his book down and came into the kitchen. He took one look at my face and put his hands on my shoulders. "Clara," he said, his voice so calm and steady, "you don't have to see them." "I know," I said, but I felt this strange, stupid, childish pull. A tiny, weak part of me whispered, maybe they've changed, maybe they want to apologize. And a stronger, colder part of me was morbidly curious. I wanted to show them. I wanted them to see my house, my garden, my business, my life. I wanted them to see Daniel. I wanted them to see everything I had built, not for their validation, but for my own satisfaction. "It's okay," I said, more to myself than to him. "It's just one visit. What's the worst that could happen?" I texted back, "This Saturday at 1 p.m. M is fine." The next few days were a wreck. I was a bundle of nerves and simmering anger. I cleaned the house obsessively, but it made me feel sick. I was cleaning for her, for my mother. "The house looks beautiful, Clara," Daniel kept telling me. "Stop cleaning." But I couldn't stop. I was that 10-year-old girl again, desperately trying to make sure the carpet was perfect. Saturday arrived, bright and sunny. At 1 p.m. exactly, a sleek, expensive-looking black sedan pulled into my driveway. My father got out of the driver's side, my mother from the passenger's. Nathan emerged from the back. They looked the same, just older. My father wore a polo shirt and a look of appraisal. My mother had her tight artificial smile plastered on her face. Nathan was scanning my house, his eyes calculating. Daniel and I stood on the porch, my porch. "Clara!" my mother exclaimed, opening her arms for a hug. It was stiff and awkward, like hugging a mannequin. "You look, well, Mom, Dad, Nathan, this is Daniel." Daniel extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." My father just looked at Daniel's hand and then gave a curt nod. He didn't shake it. "So, this is the place," he said, already walking past me into the house. They didn't behave like guests. They behaved like inspectors. My mother immediately ran a finger along a bookshelf. "A bit dusty," she murmured. "It's a nice little setup you have here," my father commented, walking through my living room, his eyes taking in the new floors, the furniture. "Must have cost you a pretty penny." "I invested in my home," I said coolly. "How much did you sink into this cottage?" Nathan asked, literally tapping on the walls. "Is this drywall? Feels a bit thin." "Grandma left it to me," I said, my patience wearing thin. "You were there, Nathan." "Yeah, but all the repairs," he pressed. "Must have cost a fortune. Good thing you got that loan." I froze. "What loan?" "Well, you must have taken out a large business loan," my mother said matter-of-factly. "You couldn't have possibly done all of this by yourself. They simply couldn't believe it. They had to invent a narrative where I had been given something." "I built my business from the ground up," I said, my voice turning icy. "I didn't take out any loans." "Of course, dear," my mother said, patting my arm condescendingly. Daniel stood quietly by the kitchen doorway, just watching. He was my anchor in this storm. My father was the worst. He toured the entire house as if he were a prospective buyer. He walked into my office, peered at my computer, inspected the guest room, and stared out at the backyard. We all eventually ended up back in the kitchen. "It's nice," my father said finally. He stood in the middle of the room looking at my mother, then at me. "But it's too big for one person." I just stared at him, speechless. I felt Daniel tense up beside me. "I'm not one person," I said. "Daniel and I live here." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Right. But you're not married. You don't have children. It's a lot of wasted space. 3 bedrooms. What are you trying to say, Dad?" I asked, though I already knew. And then he said it. The real reason they had come. "Your mother and I are thinking about retiring," he announced. "And Nathan here needs a place to get back on his feet." He lost his job. "It was a corporate restructuring," Nathan mumbled. "We're going to sell the old house in Indiana," my father continued, ignoring me completely. "And we could move in here. It just makes perfect sense. This was Rosemary's house. It's family property." "It's my house," I said. "And you'll be part of the family plan," my father said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll move in. Your mother can help you with the garden. We can all be a family again, right here. You can even keep the small guest room for yourself." I looked from one face to the next. They were completely serious. They had planned this all along. The text, the visit, the inspection. They didn't come to apologize. They came to take. They assumed that after 5 years, I was still the same weak, scared girl they had left out in the rain. They thought they could just walk back into my life and lay claim to it. "No," I said. My father's smile vanished. "What did you say?" "No," I said again. My voice was quiet, but it was made of steel. "You cannot move in here. This is my house." "Clara, don't be so selfish," my mother hissed. "We are your family." "My family," I said. I could feel Daniel's hand on the small of my back, a silent, steady support. "My family?" I looked my father straight in the eye. "When I was homeless and begging on your doorstep, you closed the door in my face. You left me in the rain. You told me, that is not my problem." I turned to my mother. "When I was about to be evicted, you told me you were too busy funding Nathan's MBA. You told me to learn to be responsible." I finally looked at my brother, and you just laughed. The kitchen was deathly silent. Their faces were masks of shock. They weren't shocked by my words, but by the fact that I had dared to say them out loud. "You lost any right to call this place home a long, long time ago," I said. "You are an ungrateful child," my father growled, his voice low and threatening. "No," I said, "I'm just done." "I think it's time for you to go," Daniel said, his voice calm but absolute. My father glared at Daniel. "You stay out of this." "He's not staying out of it," I said. "This is his home too. Get out." They left. There was no more yelling. My father just shot me a look of pure, cold fury. My mother refused to even look at me. Nathan just looked annoyed, as if he'd been inconvenienced. They climbed back into their fancy car and sped away. I stood on my porch and watched them disappear. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel like I had won. I just felt a deep, chilling cold. Daniel came out and wrapped his arm around me. "It's over," he said softly. I leaned against him. "No, it's not," I whispered. I could feel it in my bones. That wasn't the end. That was only the beginning. The past had returned, and I knew it was just waiting for another chance to get in. The shadow waited 3 weeks. I tried to push it away, to immerse myself back into the life I had built. Daniel and I spent hours in the garden. I landed a huge new client, a local winery that wanted a complete brand overhaul. It was the biggest and most exciting project of my career. The project required my attendance at a design conference in Chicago for 3 days. I had never been to a professional work conference before. I was thrilled. I even bought a new blazer. It made me feel official. "Are you sure you're okay with me going?" I asked Daniel the night before I left. The visit from my family had left a lingering sense of unease. "Clara, of course," he said, zipping up my suitcase for me. "You've earned this 100 times over. Go. Be brilliant. I'll be right here, watering the tomatoes." He kissed me goodbye at the door. As I drove to the airport, I felt like a genuine, successful adult. The conference was incredible. I met other designers whose work I admired. I even gave a small presentation on branding for small businesses. People listened. They asked questions. They liked my ideas. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged in this world. It was my last night there. I was back in my hotel room, feeling proud of myself, about to order room service. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It wasn't a call. It was a security alert. Ring camera, motion detected at back door. I frowned. It was 9 p.m. Daniel was at his bookstore hosting a late-night poetry reading. The house should have been empty. I opened the app. The live video feed loaded. My heart stopped cold. It was my father. He was on my back porch dressed in dark clothing. He was holding a crowbar. I watched, my blood turning to ice as he jammed the crowbar into the space between the door and the frame. My grandmother's door. My door. He put his full weight into it. There was a sickening, splintering crack. The door burst open. A second later, Nathan stepped into the frame, carrying 2 empty cardboard boxes. "See?" My father's tinny voice came through the phone's speaker. "Told you it would be easy. She uses a cheap lock. Let's grab the valuable stuff first," Nathan said. I watched in horror as my father and my brother disappeared into my house. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a visit. This wasn't an argument. This was a home invasion. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. I managed to dial 911. 911. "What is your emergency?" "My house," I stammered. "My house is being broken into. Right now. I'm watching it on my security camera." "Ma'am, what is your location?" "I'm in Chicago," I said, my voice rising with panic. "My house is at 15 Oakwood Lane. It's my father and my brother. They just broke down the back door. We are dispatching officers to that address right now, ma'am." "Please," I whispered. "Please, hurry." I hung up and immediately called Daniel. No answer. He was at the poetry event. I threw my clothes back into my suitcase. I ran out of the hotel, not even bothering to check out. I got in my rental car and started driving. I knew it was insane. Chicago was 5 hours away, but I just drove. I called Daniel again and again. Finally, he picked up. "Clara, everything okay? How was the closing dinner?" "Daniel, they're in the house," I sobbed, speeding down the dark highway. "My father and Nathan. They broke in. They used a crowbar. The police are on their way. They're in our house." "What?" His voice went flat and serious. "I'm leaving the store now. I'll be there in 5 minutes. I'll meet the police. Clara, you need to slow down. Just slow down. We'll handle this." I drove for 5 hours straight, through the dark, in a blind panic. I finally reached my house at 3 a.m. My quiet, peaceful street was a nightmare. 2 police cars were parked on my lawn, their blue and red lights flashing rhythmically, slashing across my house, my trees, my garden. It looked like an open wound. I pulled up and jumped out of the car. Daniel was there, talking to a police officer. And they were there, my father, my mother, and Nathan. My mother was standing on the lawn, shrieking at an officer, "We're his family!" My father looked absolutely furious, his hands cuffed behind his back. Nathan was sitting on the curb, also in handcuffs. And my lawn, my beautiful lawn, was littered with my belongings. Boxes filled with my things, my computer, my grandmother's jewelry box, files from my office, Daniel's books. They hadn't been moving in, they had been moving me out. I walked onto the lawn in a daze. Clara, Daniel saw me and ran over, wrapping his arms around me. They're here. The police got them. My father saw me, his face contorted with rage. Clara, he yelled, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. An officer approached me. He was a large, weary-looking man. Ma'am, are you Clara Montgomery? Yes, I whispered. Is this your residence? Yes. And these individuals, they're your family? Yes. This is all just a family dispute, officer, my father shouted. We were just moving some things in. She's unstable. She forgets things. The officer looked at me, his face hard to read. Your father is claiming you invited them to live here. He's lying, I said. My voice was shaky, but I looked directly at the officer. It's a domestic dispute, ma'am, the officer sighed. It's a he said, she said situation. No, I said. I pulled out my phone. My hands were still trembling, but I opened the Ring app, went to the event history, and hit play. I turned the phone so the officer could see the screen. The video began to play. The dark porch, my father with the crowbar, the loud crack of the wood, Nathan's voice. Let's grab the valuable stuff first. The officer watched the entire video without a word. His expression shifted from tired to furious. He looked over at my father. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, Mr. Montgomery, you are under arrest for breaking and entering and destruction of property. He then looked at Nathan. You too. You can't do this, my mother screamed. That's my house too. It was my mother's house. Ma'am, you need to be quiet, the officer said sternly. He turned back to me. Your back door is destroyed, he said. We can't leave the house unsecured. It's okay, I whispered. The officers put my father and my brother into the back of separate patrol cars. As they closed the door on my father, he looked right at me, his eyes filled with a venomous hatred I had never seen before. You did this, he spat. You ungrateful little... The officer slammed the door shut. My mother was left standing alone on my lawn. She just looked pathetic. The police cars drove away, their flashing lights disappearing down the street. It started to rain again. A cold, hard rain, just like that night 5 years ago. My mother stood there getting soaked. She looked at me, then at my house. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away down the dark street toward wherever they had parked their car. I stood there, on my ruined lawn, with my broken door, in the rain. Daniel put his arm around me. Family doesn't use a crowbar, I whispered. Come on, he said gently. Let's go inside. Justice didn't arrive with a clap of thunder. It came as a cold, quiet drizzle. We had to go to court. I sat on a hard wooden bench, Daniel's hand holding mine tightly. My father and my brother stood at the front of the courtroom with their lawyer. They looked small and gray in their cheap, ill-fitting suits. They pleaded guilty. They had no choice. I had the video. The judge looked down at them with contempt. He called them a disgrace. They were convicted of criminal trespassing and destruction of property. They were given probation, a hefty fine, and were ordered to pay for the replacement of my back door. And I was granted a restraining order, a simple piece of paper that said they were legally forbidden from coming within 500 feet of me, my house, or my business. A 500-foot wall made of paper. It didn't feel like a victory. It just felt exhausting. After it was all over, I went home. Daniel had already installed a new, heavy oak door with a new, much stronger deadbolt. The cottage was quiet again, but it took a long time for me to feel safe. For months, any unexpected noise in the night would jolt me awake, my heart pounding. I'd check the Ring camera compulsively. I'd walk through the dark house just to be sure. Daniel was endlessly patient. He would get up with me every time. "It's just the wind, Clara," he would say softly. "You're safe. We didn't talk about them. We just lived our lives." Beacon Design continued to grow. The winery brand I had designed won a regional award. I hired another person. The garden flourished. The tomatoes were sweet and plentiful. The lavender filled the air with its calming scent. A year passed. Daniel and I got married. It wasn't a big wedding. We didn't have any of my family there. We had our real family, a few close friends, Sophie and Leo, some of my first clients, the people from town who had embraced me. We were married in our backyard, under my grandmother's majestic old oak tree, the same one I used to cry under as a girl. I wore a simple white dress. Daniel wore a handsome blue suit. We said our vows and promised to always be each other's safe harbor. I was 33 years old. I was Clara Montgomery Price. I was a wife. I was a business owner. I was a homeowner. I was happy. A few months later, I was sitting under that same oak tree, reading a book. The air was warm and smelled of cut grass. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, assuming it was a spam call, but I picked it up. "This is Clara." There was a long silence on the other end, just the sound of faint, shaky breathing. "Hello?" I said. "Clara?" The voice was thin and weak, a voice I hadn't heard in over a year. It was my mother. "Hello, Mom," I said. My voice was calm. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was just done. "Clara?" she said again, her voice trembling. She was crying. I heard you got married." "Yes, I did," I said. I saw a picture in the local newspaper. The wedding looked beautiful." "It was," I said. She was quiet for a moment. I heard her take a ragged breath. I'm so proud of you, Clara." I stopped. I closed my book and looked out at my beautiful garden. I waited for the old feelings to rise up, the anger, the pain, the little girl inside me who wanted to scream, "Where were you? Where were you when I needed you?" But the feelings didn't come. I just felt a quiet emptiness, not for myself, but for her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Your father, he's not well. And Nathan, he's gone, moved away. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. It wasn't my story anymore. I just let her talk. She cried and talked about her life. It sounded gray and small, the very box she had always chosen to live in. Finally, she stopped. "Clara?" she asked. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you, Mom," I said. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of lavender. "Thank you," I said. It was a simple thank you. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't, "I love you." It wasn't, "It's okay." It was just closure. "I have to go, Mom," I said gently. "I have a call with a client." "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Okay. Well, goodbye, Clara." "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up the phone. I sat there under the oak tree for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free. I looked up at the sky. A few dark clouds were rolling in. It was going to rain soon. I smiled. I wasn't afraid of the rain anymore. The same storm that once tried to drown me now just watered everything I had grown.